Hello. Today, we're diving into one of the most fundamental and essential concepts in programming: data types. Now, what exactly is a data type? Let's think about this in a familiar context. Your kitchen. Where do you store milk? In a milk bottle, right? And rice. That goes in a rice container. Oil? That needs an oil bottle with a spout. Why do we go through all the trouble of using different containers for different ingredients? Why not just toss everything into the same bowl? Because it would be a disaster, of course. Each ingredient has a unique texture, consistency, and purpose. They need containers that match their nature, containers that keep them fresh, easy to access, and safe from contamination. Well, it's exactly the same with data in programming. Just like your kitchen ingredients, numbers, text, dates, or true-false values, each have their own characteristics, and they deserve a container that matches their form and function. And these containers, they're what we call data types, like int, string, boolean, and so on. Today we're going to explore the concept of data types by comparing them to ingredients and storage containers in a kitchen. Why is this important? Because understanding this one concept deeply can improve your coding, reduce bugs, and make your logic clearer, not just to computers, but to other humans reading your code, including your future self. Let's step into your kitchen for a moment. There are a bunch of ingredients neatly stored in their respective containers. Rice is in an airtight pourable bin. Milk is in a sealed bottle in the fridge. Salt is in a shaker, flour in a dry container, and chili powder in something tightly sealed to prevent moisture. Why? Because that's what works best for each ingredient. We've learned over time that some materials spoil easily, some clump up with moisture, and some are dangerous if not handled right. Now imagine this. What happens if you pour milk into your rice bin just because the milk bottle was dirty? At first, you might think, oh, it fits. But then it leaks. It's impossible to pour. The leftover milk inside turns sour. And worst of all, you just ruined your rice. That's the kind of chaos that happens in programming when you use the wrong data type. If you take a number and try to store it as a string, or take a true-false value and store it as a number, you're doing the same thing as mixing milk and rice in the same container. It may seem to work, but under the surface, it's risky, messy, and just waiting to explode in your face when you least expect it. Let's go back to the kitchen analogy again. Suppose you're preparing to cook dinner. You've laid out ingredients, and each one is in its right container. Flour is dry and fluffy, so it's stored in something wide and easy to scoop. Salt flows easily, so a small shaker does the trick. Oil, being a liquid, needs a bottle that doesn't spill and is easy to pour. And raw meat, that's sealed, refrigerated, and handled separately for safety. Why all this fuss? Because these are best practices. They match the behavior of the ingredient to its container. This is the same mindset we need as developers. When we store data, we need to choose a container, that is, a data type that makes sense. A whole number? That goes in an int type. A line of text like, hello? That belongs in a string. A condition like yes or no. That fits best in a boolean. Trying to force a string into a boolean is like trying to cook soup in a waffle iron. It's not going to end well. Why do we need so many types? Wouldn't it be easier to just have one container where everything goes? Think about this. What if you put rice, sugar, flour, coffee, and salt into the same big bin? Sure, you saved on containers. But now, every time you cook, you have to guess what you're scooping. You might think it's sugar, but it's actually salt. That sweet cake? Ruined. The stew? bitter. In programming, this is exactly what happens if you don't use proper data types. You start guessing what's in your variables. Maybe it works now, but you, or someone else, will read the code later and have no idea what kind of data lives inside that container. That's how bugs are born. That's how systems crash. So proper data types are not just for order, they're for clarity, safety, and long-term sanity. Let me ask you something. Have you ever mistaken sugar for salt while cooking, or used vinegar thinking it was oil? In programming, that's like trying to calculate with a string instead of a number. You try to add it, and suddenly the computer gives you something completely unexpected or throws an error in your face. It's not just about preventing crashes. It's about making your intentions crystal clear. When you use the right data type, you're telling the computer, this is exactly what I'm working with. This number is meant to be calculated. This text is meant to be displayed. This Boolean is used for decision making. In cooking, putting ingredients in the right place isn't just about neatness. It affects everything, from how fast you can cook to whether the dish turns out edible. Same goes for your code. So, what should we do with this knowledge? First, always ask, what kind of data am I dealing with? Is it a count, a price, a label, a yes, no condition? Second, be consistent. If you started storing temperatures as numbers, don't suddenly switch to strings halfway through. That's how bugs creep in. Third, be explicit when you convert between types. Just like you might turn milk into cream or melt butter before baking, you sometimes need to convert data types, but do it with intention. Know why you're doing it, and document it clearly. Just like a recipe note that says, melt the butter before mixing. At this point you might be thinking, isn't this a bit excessive? It's just data. But here's the truth. Data types are one of the strongest tools you have as a developer. They protect your code, they guide your logic, and they communicate meaning, not just to machines, but to your team, your future self, and anyone who ever reads your code. They're not just containers, they're promises about how your data will behave. Let's wrap it up. Think of your code base as a kitchen. If you're sloppy with ingredients and storage, everything becomes chaotic and error-prone. But if your flour is in the flour bin, your oil is in the oil bottle, and your spices are neatly arranged, then anyone, even someone new to the kitchen, can walk in and start cooking. Good data types make your code clean, maintainable, and a joy to work with. Milk goes in the milk bottle. Rice belongs in the rice bin. In code, int holds whole numbers. String holds text. And Boolean holds true, false. Respect the container. Understand the contents. And your software will be stable, powerful, and elegant, just like a perfectly organized kitchen.